A very good morning to all our attendees today. Today's webinar is hosted by Naganda's Khandwala College, NKC, Malad, West Mumbai. The college was founded in July 1983 and is one of the best colleges in the western suburbs of Mumbai. It has been imparting quality education since the last 4 decades. The college is affiliated to University of Mumbai and re-accredited by UGC grade. The college has shown tremendous growth in a short span of time and has been conferred with the autonomous college status in academic year 2016 and 17. Mission is an initiative by Nagindas Khandwala College and the Center for Sports Management. We are extremely thankful to the principal, Dr. Ansi Jose ma'am, and Dr. Varsha Ainapure ma'am. Communication is possibly one of the most important aspects in human life. When it comes to human communication, we live in a society and communicating all the time, either verbally or non verbally. Therefore, it is very important for us to understand as to how one should communicate effectively. It gives me immense pleasure to introduce you all to our speaker today, Mr. Subodh Mallya, an MBA with more than 11 years of experience in investment banking and ECM. He has worked on IPOs of several companies including BSE Limited, Parag Milk Foods, SP Apparels, MAS Financials, Indostar, AU Small Finance Bank, and many more. Also, he has worked on QIPs of DHFL, Yes Bank, Indian Overseas Bank, United Bank of India, GMR Infrastructure Right Issues of Central Bank of India, Bajaj Hindustan, Alok Industries, etc. He's handled government disinvestments of NBCC, MOIL, and SJVN through IPOs, ITDCs, NFL, and MMTC through OFS. I think without any further delay, I would like to hand over this session to Subodh sir. Subodh sir, on behalf of the entire team of Mission Skills, I would like to welcome you for today's webinar.
Thank you so much, Maria. So, good morning, everyone. I hope you guys are enthused for attending another webinar on a Saturday. And I'm sure you could have been doing a lot of other things like watching PUBG or playing some other games or watching Chintu Ka birthday, which just released yesterday. But thank you for taking time out and coming onto this webinar. And so a quick disclaimer, I work for a financial services company, and when I come to the public relations part of this presentation, I will explain to you why what you say in public is very important. So just a quick disclaimer, and I like using various means to connect with the audience that I'm talking to. One of the ways that I found extremely helpful is Dilbert. So I'm not sure how many of you all follow Dilbert, but I've put a link on the last slide, so maybe we can you can have a look there. Okay, so let's start. So we are today in probably one of the best times of our lifetime, and obviously that is true for all generations. Whenever they are faced with something new, there is always an apprehension about what is going to happen. But from our perspective, I think this COVID pandemic has made us realize something, that a lot of us can actually work quite well from the comfort of our home. A lot of us are able to have high levels of productivity while working from home. And one of the key reasons for that is because the human brain is an amazing thing. So before we get on to what communication is, I thought let me just take you through what is widely believed to be the four new C's of the 21st century. So there are basically four parts to it, and communication is, while it's last, it's probably the most important aspect, and let me explain why. So there are four parts to this four C's. The first part is critical thinking. Now, what is critical thinking? It basically is a new way of learning across subjects and disciplines, and it is an essential skill in any profession, mine included. So what it allows you to do is it allows you to keep your focus on the problem at hand and ensure that the solution that you're getting for this problem is based on thorough research, your own experience, your own wisdom, and this allows you to find solutions to many problems. Now, the more focused you are, and the more wisdom you have, and the more experience you have, the more complex are the problems you can solve. And as you keep falling down on the scale, your ability to do problem solving becomes that much more difficult. Which is why I think I have put critical thinking as the first important C of the new century. The second one is creativity. Now, I'm sure all of you have TikTok accounts. I'm sure all of you have Instagram accounts, and have are subscribing to channels on YouTube. And you can see that there is an immense spurt of creativity that has come about in the 21st century. Part of this is because you are now having a lot of access. So, my parents, for example, the only way they could watch creativity was on probably 2 times a day on Doordarshan, whereas now everything for you is available on tap. So there are a lot of avenues for you to express your creativity, and creativity is extremely important because while people may think that creativity is only in the domain of scientists, or in the domain of doctors, or technicians, creativity can be done in the simplest of things. So for instance, my air conditioners at home broke down. So my wife said, why don't we freeze one large bottle of water and keep it, because she'd seen that on YouTube, and it actually helped with the cooling. So, it could be something as small as that, or it could be something as large as watching the SpaceX guys launch a rocket with NASA to outer space. So creativity is extremely important and extremely relevant in all walks of life. The other part is collaboration. Now, collaboration is all about working together to reach a goal. And why it is important is, when God distributed our skills, our talent, and our luck, he made sure that everyone didn't get the same. And why that is important is because if everyone had the same, then uh, there is no point of there is no meritocracy that remains, right? So with the uneven distribution of talent, with an uneven distribution of skill, what God has actually done is he has allowed people to come together to form a team and complete a task. Think about it this way: don't look at it as competition, look at it as collaboration, because when you work with others, you'll be surprised at what is the level of output that you can come out with, as opposed to just working on your own. And never underestimate the power of teamwork. I'm sure you have heard a lot of stories and quotations on teamwork, but I have been working now for 11 years in investment banking, and before that another 3 years in a family business. And let me tell you that however small or big the team is, everyone matters. And I'm particularly concerned about when you guys are doing your projects in groups. Don't think that any of you is less important or more important. Like I said, God has given you talents. They may be different talents, but all of you all are important. So collaboration is extremely important. And the last one is, of course, communication, which is what today's webinar is about. It's about sharing your thoughts, ideas, and solutions. And in today's technological age, it is so much easier to communicate than it ever has been. But there are certain key things that we need to remember about communication, and hopefully this presentation is going to help you achieve that. So let me move on to the next slide. So what I will attempt to cover today is basically what, how, and the why of communication, and I will explain the how and help you, in building some competencies. The second is what all forms part of public relations, because a lot of us, have seen public relations in some form or the other, but don't really know what it is, what it entails, and how we can go about doing public relations. So that will be the second part of the presentation. We'll spend about 10-15 minutes on that. So let me start with the communications part. So this is a quote that I really abide by and I follow. God grant us the serenity to accept the things that we cannot change, courage to change the things that we can, and wisdom to know the difference. Right? So keep this in mind, because I think these quotes, while a lot of you may think that अरे ये तो देखा है, ये तो internet पे आता है, WhatsApp forwards में आता है. The reason they're famous is because it has helped somebody, and whenever it helps somebody, the first thing that you want to do is share it. So this has helped me, and that's why I thought I'll share it with you, lovely people. Right. So communication, how has it evolved? So around 40,000 years ago, when we were still evolving as a species, and we were still walking on, we just begun walking on two legs, and we just begun the concept of living together. A lot of historians and archaeologists have found cave paintings that date back to 40,000 years ago. So that's what is believed to be the earliest form of communication, which is cave paintings. Let's do a quick fast forward and come to 105 AD. That is around 1900 years ago. So 1900 years ago, paper was first invented in China. In 1800 years, the next big evolution for communication happened, which is when the telephone was developed. Another 100 years later, the personal computer was developed. 20 years after that, internet became extremely prevalent. And 20 years after that, we have a virtual presence where you can see half my body and expect me to give you a lot of gyan. So why is this evolution important? Because if you see the time taken by human beings to move from one important milestone to another has been falling, and with every fall in that communication evolution, what has happened is we have become more detached from the way we communicate. So if you look at the bottom of the screen, when humans began just talking to each other, the level of attachment that was there was quite significant. Then we move on to letters, where there is attachment, there is that personal touch. Then we came to phones, where the communication became much shorter. In fact, I remember when phones first came, STD calls and ISD calls used to be so unique that it would hardly last 1 or 2 minutes because it was so expensive. Today, your phones are an integral part of your body. In fact, I don't think any one of us is sitting on this webinar without having their phone in the hand. I'm sure a lot of you are already doing something else. So that is exactly what I mean by saying when the phone and messaging has made our communication neutral. Because when it becomes neutral, what happens is it stops becoming a two-way communication and starts becoming more or less a 1 or 1.5 way communication. As we are moved forward along the communication lines, you have emails, which is again a strictly one-way communication. You send an email, you get it back. And then you have social media, where it's completely one way, and you can be anonymous and you can pretty much write and do and say whatever you want. So why is this evolution important? Is because if you have to stay relevant in today's day and age, communication is extremely important. But if you have to stay relevant in today's day and age, personal communication, making sure that the face behind the comment or the idea behind that line that you've posted or the intention behind that Twitter handle that you've created is all well known. See, because it's extremely easy to be courageous behind the cloak of anonymity. When you're anonymous, nobody knows who you are. It's extremely brave. But what is even more brave is doing your research, getting personal, finding out what circumstances led to your comment, and only then commenting. And hopefully, in the next couple of slides, I should help you with that. So, what is communications? Let's do some theory. There are basically 5 forms of communication. You have the intrapersonal, uh, which is basically when the sender and the receiver are the same, which basically means you're either talking to yourself or you're thinking about something. So you're the sender, you're the receiver, you're communicating with yourself. Interpersonal is when two people are communicating. Group is when there is a classroom or a workplace. So whenever you're sitting in your class and there is non-stop chatter going on while the teacher is trying her best to impart wisdom, that is group communication. It should not be happening, so don't do it. But yeah, that's what it is. Public communication is what I'm doing right now, where you have one person who's addressing a large gathering, and then you have mass communication, which is what I think a lot of you know. It's where you create content and then you send it out to diverse sets of people. So you could have like an advertisement or a radio or something on TV or on social media, when you're sending it out to vast number of people without really knowing who is going to be the end recipient. So that's mass communication. And then you have non-verbal communication, which is basically when you send messages to people without you knowing. So for example, if I raise my eyebrow, that's probably a sign of surprise, or are you kidding me? So that's a non-verbal cues. And why is this important? It's because it's extremely important to know who your audience is. So do I talk like this in my daily life? Maybe not. Do I talk like this to my wife? Maybe not. But because I am on a public forum today, I am addressing a large gathering, my communication methodology, the way I talk, the way I present, has to change. Now, people may say that, "Arey, ye to fake hai." This is not fake. This is what we call adaptation. And it is extremely important. And you learn why, hopefully, as the slides go along. So why does communication need to be clear? So I think you had one speaker from the John Maxwell Institute sometime this week. So John Maxwell is an excellent author, and I've read a lot of his books, and he's quite inspirational. So one of the things he says in his book, and that really stuck home, was it's not just enough to work hard. It's not just enough to do a great job. To be successful, you need to really know how to communicate with others. And what he also goes on to say is that while many people know how to communicate, very few people connect. And the reason for that is because if you see, you may have already experienced this. So, you would have worked very hard on a project. You would have done, something extremely nice for someone you love, or you would have done, some task for your parents. But the desired results have remained invisible, or the person to whom you've done this didn't appreciate it because the results were not what was actually required. And this is due to a lack of proper understanding, which stems from a lack of effective communication. So it is extremely essential that in an interconnected world where everyone is connected all the time, that communication is done in a manner that is extremely clear. And when you connect with people, what that allows you to do is it allows you to relate to them, and at the end of the day, it helps you to influence them. Now, when I say influence, what I mean is not causing them to do something which they don't want to do, but rather when I say influence, what it means is you are able to connect with them at a level where they will take you seriously, they will respect you, and connecting is one of the major parts of communicating. right? So in a nutshell, communication is transactional. That is, each person is both sending and receiving simultaneously, and the parties that are communicating, they have an impact on each other, and it is a process. So every event or every communication, it's a continuous flow, right? So it the experience of the previous communication has an impact on the next one, and so on and so forth. So you have to be extremely careful about how your communication is shaping up. Okay, so let's do a quick poll. Do you think the presenter of this webinar is a fat bearded man?
Let me quickly guide our audience as to how they can take up the poll. You can see a pop up screen on your screens, a pop up box. All you have to do is just select the right answer. And uh,
So a lot of you are being nice to me. In fact, 105 people, 18 people are being honest, and 10 people are being really honest. So let's see how this pans out. We'll give you another 20 seconds. Don't worry, I don't know which one is calling me fat and which one is not. So please go ahead and vote. And I'll tell you why I'm doing this, apart from, of course, making fun of me, which I love doing. Okay, so I think we can end the poll.
so, yes, I guess we have received the maximum answers for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So of the votes received, 77% say, no, dude, you're fine. 15% say, yes, absolutely. And 8% say, don't know, can't say. Now, while my face may be fat, the question was, do you think the presenter of this webinar is a fat bearded man? Now, 15% of you said yes, absolutely. When you say yes, I can understand. When you say yes, absolutely, you either know me or you have seen me. I don't think that has happened. I am fat. I'm not saying I'm not, but you don't know that. So what you have done now is you have assumed basis what I have led you to believe. If I had asked you, do you think I am fit, or what do you think of me, where I am not leading you on, your answer might have been different. But when I have asked you, do you think that the presenter of this webinar is a fat bearded man, you say yes, absolutely. Now, why is that? Because innately, what our brain likes to do is it likes to search for cues. So the minute it gets a cue, it latches onto that cue and then builds around a support for that cue. So, for example, if I have told you that I am a fat bearded man, in your mind, you've already made up your mind that is a fat bearded man, and one of the answers there says yes, absolutely. Your first task is to go and say yes. The guys who have said no, now I am fat, you can make out from the screen that I'm definitely not thin, but you said no because you guys are kind and you wanted to make sure that I am not offended. But sometimes you need to offend. Sometimes you need to, uh, say what's true. And let me try and help you get there. To the guys who said don't know, can't say, spot on. You don't know because you haven't seen me. You don't, and you can't say because, probably this is not the right forum to say that. So perfect. So let's close the poll for now and let's move on. So the why and the how. Now, for me, the purpose of communication is to feel respected, to give and to get information, to be empathetically understood, to cause or change or to cause action, to create excitement, and 1,000 other reasons. You, the reason may be different. And what are the ways in which we can communicate? So you have speaking, you have listening, you have writing, and you have reading. So these are the four hows of communication. So let's quickly look at each of these. I promise I'm not going to make it boring. So let's start with speaking. Now, most of you, right from when you're a child, have been told कि speak your mind, जो तेरे दिमाग में है बोल दे. don't hesitate, and you shouldn't. You should speak your mind. But is it always the right way to do? So how the brain works is the brain has several layers, and each layer is, it has a different function. So typically, so let's assume that this guy is a more handsome version of me, thinner, fitter, and probably much younger. So the first thing that comes out from your brain is your instinct. So the minute someone says something to you, instinctively you want to react. It travels the fastest. The impulse to react travels the fastest, but it is not always reliable, because instinct is based on nothing but instinct, right? What you want is the next part, which is wisdom. All your reading, all your learning, everything that you know about a subject, extremely important, but very slow to come to the surface. So if you look at the speed, while instinct has already reached, wisdom is catching up. The third aspect is experience. I have seen this before. You've been in a situation before, but again, very slow to come to the surface, because the brain, unlike a computer, has a different way of retrieval of information, and you have to train your brain to make sure that everything moves same on the same speed. And the last and the most important aspect is restraint, not saying anything at all. Very hard to develop and very even more difficult to practice. So if you see these arrows, the reason they're of different lengths is important. Instinct travels the fastest, wisdom second, experience third, and restraint fourth. Now, for different people, the speed of this will be different. But the idea of any communications webinar, or of any uh, uh, focus areas, is to make sure that all of these four travel at the same speed. Because if it doesn't, and instinct is the first thing that reaches people, then this is what is going to happen. You're going to say something that you don't mean, you're going to say something that you would regret, and you're going to say something that you can't take back. So let me give you some examples about what happens when you don't pay attention, and you let instinct take over. So I don't know if all of you have done, have played PUBG. Now in PUBG you have something called a team mode, where four people jump from an aeroplane together. Typically you follow a leader, but you can choose to jump alone if you like, and you can follow the leader. So what happens is, if someone is saying, let's jump at this particular spot, and then immediately after that says, no, let's not. What is happening is your brain has already processed the first part, and you have already reacted. Whereas if you had a little wisdom or a little experience, you would have said, okay, wait, let him complete what he's saying, and let me react after that. So what happens with us is, while we are taught in college and school to read and write, no one actually teaches us speaking. And apart from public speaking courses, typically people don't know, people are not taught how to speak. You just speak. So when you do that, what happens is, you may not always be utilizing all your faculties, and it is important that you develop all your faculties while you speak. So the problem lies with the fact that many people know that यार बात तो हम कर सकते हैं, हम लोग पिछले 16 साल 18 साल, मेरे केस में 36 years से मैं बात कर रहा हूँ, मुझे बात करना आता है. But maybe you want to reconsider that. Maybe you want to go step back and say that, okay, I know how to speak, but am I speaking correctly? Is there some way that I can make it better? And I have found that these four aspects of your speech are important, and there are easy ways of making sure that this happens. For the second one, it's very easy. You need to read, you need to learn more about the subject matter. And if you don't have a knowledge about the subject matter, practice number 4, which is restraint. If you don't know about something, don't say anything, because there is a good chance that if you do end up saying something, you could. So I'll give you an example. During the last year of my graduation, we had a viva, where an external examiner came and was asking questions. So I had practiced quite hard. Like today, I had gotten up early, brushed my teeth, made sure that I'm nice and fresh for the webinar, like I was for the Viva, and I had practiced a lot of questions and the answers to those questions. So when the external professor came, he said, "What is the derivative of?" And I didn't let him complete, and I blurted out, whatever what was the answer that I had prepared for. Now, had he asked the question fully, I would have realized that that is the answer that I gave was not of the question that he asked, but I had already said it, and I couldn't take it back. And I can give you hundreds of such examples where over the years I have started using restraint more, where I prefer not to talk if I don't know. So this is something that is important, and step back, figure out, let all four come together and then speak. And like I said, not always important to speak when you don't need to. Now the second part is listening. Now, just like speaking, listening is something that comes naturally to us, and people think that, do I really need to know how to listen? Well, it is important, and let me start with the example. So, any circumstance, you don't need to look at this example per se, but let's start with this example. Please complete this work before you leave. uh, the subordinate is listening but not really responding. But when the boss says, please complete this work before you leave, or there's no need to come from tomorrow, there is a threat associated. So, like I said, the brain works in very funny ways. Unless there is an incentive or a threat associated with something, typically we don't listen well. So, consider yourself sitting in class. Now, the teacher has probably spent 15, 20 days preparing for each class, has read up a lot, probably something that you guys might not have done. But when you're sitting in class, the only reason you're listening to her is because you're afraid that if you don't, then she'll either shout at you or you won't do well in your exams. Next time, just try listening to her because she knows what she's talking, and look at the change in your listening ability, and look at the change in the way you're able to absorb. Because I have realized, in the time that I have been working, is that while threat and incentive based listening works for some situations, what really works is if you're able to develop that skill without any threat or without any incentive. Okay, so some individuals are better speakers than others. You need some training for it to build, to come out to the fore. uh, Likewise in skill, it is it is either a native gift or it needs to be acquired by training. Now what I mean by training is, you need to be able to absorb and not only hear. And why is this important? Like the Dalai Lama says, when you talk, you're only repeating what you already know. But if you listen, you may learn something new. And it's very easy to dismiss all of these things as ye to quotations hai. But if you look at some of the most crazy success stories in life, Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, all of them have succeeded because they listened. They listen to their client, they listen to their consumer. So listening is as important as speaking, and for me it's probably even more important than speaking. Okay, now we come to writing. So the way I look at writing is very simple. You have an idea, uh, you have several ideas, so you structure that idea, you structure those ideas, and then you have to present them. Now how do you present them? You typically use words, or some graphics, or some pictures. The sum total of this is your writing. What is the purpose of what you're writing, and who is the audience? This is your ideation phase, having several ideas that need to be expressed. And what is the structure? That is your structuring phase. Do I use less words, more words, fancy words, simple words? That is the presentation. And the actual words you use is your vocabulary. Now, whenever I meet younger people, one of the constant feedback that I get is, sir, we don't our vocabulary is not that good. Now, obviously, vocabulary is not something you're born with. So, okay, so let's look at it this way, that no one is born with language. You acquire it. So if you are able to acquire it and it is free, why not try? So the simplest way to acquire vocabulary is by reading. And uh, you know, fancy words. People say, you're using fancy words. But you're not using fancy words. What you're doing is, instead of using 15-20 different words to express an idea, you're using one word. That is not fancy. That is just being smart. You're saving your time and you're appearing to look professional. So whenever you're writing, it is important that you are following these four aspects, which is, have an idea of what you're going to write, who you're writing to. Very important. Don't use the same language to write to your boss that you would use to write to, your parents, or vice versa. And the reason is, writing is just like speaking, except it's there in written form, and it is there forever. One of the problems that, a lot of people face today is, when they write something, they can't take it back, because someone has taken a screenshot of it, has shared it on WhatsApp groups, made fun of it, and it's done and dusted. So, which is why, just like speaking, just like listening, what you need to do is, you need to step back, structure your ideas, and then present it. And believe me, 90% of the world uses simple words for communicating, and they're doing a good job. You don't need fancy words. What you need to know, what you need to do is, you need to ensure that when you're writing, there is clarity. Many people write emails the way they think. Don't do that. What you think is how you speak, but how you speak should not be how you write. So, let me give you an example. If I have to tell my junior that, please make sure that this job is done before you leave. Also, please make sure that you take care when doing it, and make sure you have dinner. Don't waste too much time. Now, I have told him 150 different things. Of all of these things, only the important things will go into the email. And when I'm putting it in email, I will use words like please. I will use words like thank you. Not because I don't mean it, because I actually mean it. So that's the other thing that you need to develop. The empathy that you normally would have when you're speaking, you should put the same in writing. Now, why is this important? Today, you can be anonymous. Like I said earlier, you can be anonymous and go on any of these social media platforms and write whatever you want. Uh, say whatever you want. Is that something that you would want to do for the rest of your life? Probably not. So look at it from that perspective, that when you're writing something, it is going to be there with you or with someone else for posterity. So make sure that you're empathetic, you're clear in your structure and your presentation. And if you want to improve your vocabulary, then you should definitely do the next part, which I'm going to do. Can we have the next poll, please? So we've been locked in now for the last 2 months. A lot of people, have been doing different things. So if the guys who are here can please quickly take the poll and let me know. Excellent. So 2-3 hours of PUBG, read a book, TikTok. So the funny thing with TikTok is, people think that it's a waste of time. I tend to agree with a lot of them, but there are some really good creators, and there's a lot of creativity out there. So do that in balance. I only watch one thing on TikTok, which is Meg and Emmett, the Riddler family. They put out riddles and puzzles, which I love. 5 people have watched Shintu Ka Birthday. Very good. 6 people. So these are the early adopters. They want to make sure that anything that comes out new has been done. Okay, so we'll give another 10 seconds. Guys, please vote. I'm not going to be judging you. Neither is your college or your school going to be judging you. This is just to get a fair sense on how we do and on what we've done in the last 2 months. And let me tell you why. Okay, I think we can stop the polling. All right, excellent. Now, the reason I put these 5 things is because I've done all of them. Okay. And what I wanted to demonstrate to you is just because you're playing 2-3 hours of PUBG a week, just because you're on TikTok for 2-3 hours a week, or you spend time watching a movie, or you spend time doing a puzzle, does not mean you can't take out half an hour to 45 minutes every day to read 1 or 2 chapters of a good book. And so I come from Goa. Okay, I don't know how many of you have been to Goa, but it's now become a party place. But when I was growing up, it was extremely quiet. At 6:30, everything would kind of shut down, and you know everything would shut down, and the only way I could kind of keep myself busy or entertained was reading. And when I came to Bombay 12 years ago, and we were discussing with my MBA friends about what we used to do and how we were growing up, I was amazed that people in metros like Bombay, Delhi, and bigger cities have so much to do. And I used to feel left out, that I could not do a lot of these things. But as I started growing up, I realized that the time that I spent reading has actually helped me come and sit in front of you sit before you today, because that has helped me immensely. And I always believe that if someone has already taken the effort of writing something for you, they have already done the research, they have already done the thinking. All you need to do is open that book and enjoy what you read. So let's quickly go now to reading, and are you getting everything right? So are you getting everything? Now, I have read, I love Harry Potter. I have read Harry Potter maybe 6 or 7 times, all six books, all 7 books, and the Lord of the Rings as well as the Hobbit. I read those maybe 1 or 2 times. I watched all the movies. But while I was researching for this webinar, I was just going through some of the things that I may have missed, and these are the 3 things I missed from the Harry Potter books, and these are the 3 things that I missed from the Lord of the Rings books. So are you getting everything? So what happens with a lot of us is that when we are reading, it is not the central activity. So a lot of us like to put our earphones, listen to music. A lot of us like to watch some TV while reading. Don't do that. Don't do that, because reading is probably the one thing which is the easiest to do, and believe me, is going to be the most beneficial for you. Of course, it would help if you read your textbooks as well, and I'm not saying you shouldn't. But apart from your textbooks and apart from your reference books, what you should also do is get some bit of non-fiction and fiction books involved, because what that helps you do is it helps you increase your vocabulary. It helps you momentarily go into a different world that has been created by the author. It helps you learn tremendously. 50% of everything that I've learned in my MBA came from my books, and the remaining 50% came from amazing professors who taught me. And were it not for the combination of those two, probably I would not be as happy I am today with my job, right? So reading is extremely important. And let me come to some misconceptions about reading. Now, while I'm talking to you, my mouth is moving, my head is moving, and while I'm writing, my hand is moving, or my fingers are moving for typing. But listening and reading are considered to be passive, because you honestly aren't doing anything, right? Wrong. There is nothing more engaging than reading or listening. Now, I can go on for hours about communication, about public relations, but if the you know uh, all the participants here are not paying attention to what I'm saying, it's going to be pointless, right? So reading is exactly the same. And the reason I've put this cricket picture here is I'm hoping that all of you all will be able to relate, is that if the batsman who is giving the edge to the slip, and the slips, the fielder doesn't catch the catch, that transaction is not completed. So the person who is receiving it has to be as active as the person who is edging it, right? So which is why reading is as active as listening. And I don't think anyone can tell you otherwise, that when you are reading, your focus has to be completely on reading. And if you want to listen to music, I mean, that's up to you. But the idea of reading is to absorb what you're doing. And typically I have realized that I function the best when I'm doing one thing at a time. So for example, when I'm talking to you, I'm talking to you. If there are 15 different things going on around me and I don't pay attention, I can still do this perfectly. So reading is not a passive activity. It is an entirely active activity, and you should do it as much as you can, whenever you can. People who read books are not nerds. They may look like nerds to you today, but believe me, 10 years down the line, when you're sitting in that job interview and you're asked an extremely obscure question which you have no idea about, that boy who sat in the library and read unnecessary things, he's probably going to get it right. So don't underestimate reading, right? So we quickly move on to public relations. Now, I'm not 100% sure whether all of you know what public relations is, but the reason I've put this picture is because a lot of us think that public relations is basically just media relations. And unfortunately, the public relations industry does a terrible job of public relations. In fact, if you ask a lot of people in public relations what they do, they will throw words at you, words which you may not know, because it's difficult for you to actually relate. So for relating to what public relations really is, let me take you through a few examples of what is PR, and you definitely experienced this before. So explaining to bank employees that a merger between three banks might cause some job losses, but will help the bank survive in the long term. Stopping tabloid newspapers from reporting wrongly that some celebrities in the party were in an intoxicated state just before a movie release. Telling the entire country that they cannot step out of their houses 15 days, 4 times in a row, and still stay calm despite being pained at their hardship. Putting together a channel on YouTube so that all activities that happen, your Yuva League, all festivals that you are conducting, all of that is put out there. Putting a standee outside a supermarket to showcase some life. So I'm sure you've been to DMart and you've seen someone handing you samples. And explaining to news outlet why things in a country of 1.3 billion people will take time. So these are all examples of public relations. So what exactly is public relations? Public relations is basically communicating and managing relationships for a company or an organization with the public, right? So how does PR actually work? Okay, so before that, let's say what basically is public relations. You are in the business of persuading people. Okay, so you are in the business of persuading your audience that look, this is a product that I have to sell, this is an idea that I have to sell, this is a service that I have to sell, and this is not to be confused with marketing, because marketing guys only do this. What PR guys do is they go above and beyond this. They go and promote, your entire entity. They tell you that this company has got these laurels in the past. They tell you that we are following the best safety practices. They come out every quarter and declare results. So public relations is basically the PR person within an organization who communicates the ideas to the public. Now, you would have seen in several instances people who are standing in front of the media and giving interviews. uh, those are PR persons, but that is not their only job. In fact, what PR people do encompasses a lot of things. So there is event management, there is media relations, there is internal communication, like I told you, communicating to all the employees about why a merger cannot will cause some job losses, but will help you survive in the long run. Digital platforms, so you have people who hire influencers, who make sure that they are using all the possible tools available to them to go and shout out whenever a new product is being launched or whenever a new service is being launched. Reputation management, very very important today. You are guilty by association. So for example, if celebrity A has done something wrong and celebrity B was just standing next to him but did not say anything while that wrong thing was being done, celebrity B immediately is maligned as being wrong themselves. And this can happen to any of us, right? So for example, if you're standing next to the site of an accident and you are not done anything, when you're actually supposed to help that person, uh, you could very easily be blamed as well. So reputation management in today's day and age is extremely important, because news travels so fast, and with WhatsApp, fake news travels even faster. So uh, you have a an immediate task at hand. So while WhatsApp has worked really hard in making sure that um, their platform is not misused, and they have done a good job at managing their own reputation. uh, you know there are still instances where your reputation needs to be managed, and that's where a PR person comes in. Community relations, now in India, community relations may not be able to relate to it, because we are a large population in a very small piece of land. But in more developed countries, this is very critical, because what happens there is, even if you're digging a well to draw water for your plant, for your factory, and that is depleting the water table level in that area, the residents from close by can come and really take you to task and halt the production and everything. So a PR's job is to maintain those relations, and one of the most important tasks is crisis communication. For example, the COVID-19 crisis has caused tremendous hardship across industries, across companies, across sectors, and the PR people within all of these organizations are working extremely hard to make sure that everyone stays calm, nobody takes rash decisions. So it's managing relationships with the public for a company or an organization. So that's basically what a public relations is. Right. So let's come to the next one. Is what does PR include? So basically, let me quickly take you through what it includes. So you have a press pack, which is basically a product review. You'll give samples out at a press release. You have phone calls, briefings, conferences. Typically, I don't know how many of you all are going to go up from your commerce field and go and continue to do something in finance. But when you have your quarterly numbers, when you have your results, when you have certain events happening in your company, so the PR guy will make sure that you're connected with the right people and the right people know about what's happening. You have promotional events, you have company websites, very very critical. The company website is basically your house, and for a company, that's where you reside in the internet. So just like you have your family taking care of the way your house moves and looks, and you have someone who comes and cleans it every day. PR people are those guys for the company. They make sure that the company website is spot on. All the information is updated. Anything that is happening in the company and organization is put out there. So that's basically what your PR does. And how can you get into PR? So I've already taken you through the 4 aspects of communication. Most PR people are good at all of them, because in PR, communications is probably the focal point of what you do. Of course, you need talent. Of course, you need creativity. but communication skills is what is extremely critical. And how can you join a job in PR? Write a lot, blog a lot. Nobody needs to see your blog, you can keep it personal, but as you write you realize how creative you are. Take interest in PR, media, business. Keep learning about what are the new trends that are there, how people are actually using social media to influence other people. Work experience and network. So this is probably the easiest. So whenever you have time between 2 years, do an internship at some media house. You'll get to see the other side of PR. You'll get to be the receiver of public relations. Get involved in staging events. I think you know people look down upon event management, but it's extremely difficult task to do. And when you get involved, you realize how there are so many moving parts, and you should get involved in that. That will also help you in a career in PR. And do volunteer PR services for charities and societies. So I'm sure a lot of you are already involved with a lot of charitable work. Doesn't need to be any major thing. Helping stray dogs in your area, making sure that you're putting out notices in societies that please be careful when you're driving at night. There are stray dogs sleeping. Simple things like that will help you get into the mindset of being in PR, right? So I think that concludes my 1 hour. To all of those who are still with us and have not yet been poisoned by my PowerPoint slides, I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you, firstly, sir, for such an interesting presentation. I must say, and I'm sure there is a lot that the students have got and have understood as to how to work on their communication skills. Having said that, let me just quickly let all our participants know as to how they can put in their questions. You can see a Q&A box on your screen. Any one of you have any kind of questions, kindly put in your questions on the Q&A box, and we shall be taking it up. We've already received a few questions from our participants, so we'll just quickly take up a few questions. Now, first and foremost, today when we speak about communication in the 21st century, I think a lot of people depend upon different modes and mediums of communication, and the digital platforms have become one of the most important aspect of communication. So I guess a lot of us are on Twitter, Facebook. We communicate digitally a lot nowadays. So just can you throw some light as to how do we ensure that we are communicating effectively on these kind of platforms?
Sure. So let's divide our communication on social media into two parts. One is your personal communication, and one is your official communication. So most of you right now will be still studying, so only the personal communication would matter to you. But remember this, that uh, when you communicate on social media, it's very easy to be very smart and give quick answers or give quick comments or put people down, because that's the easiest thing to do. So the important thing to remember about communicating on social media is, just imagine if you were at the receiving end of that communication. Would you be happy? If the answer is yes, then probably what you're saying is perfectly fine. If the answer is no, then you need to step back, like I showed you on the slide. Don't let instinct take over. Rather, let experience, wisdom, and all that you've learned help you to make sure that you're making use of this social media correctly.
Correct. Also, there are a lot of students who are asking for some books that they can read, or any of your suggestions that you will give it to them to read in the time that they have. So I think you've already displayed a few books on the
So,
screen.
yeah, so I think Ruturaj had asked which books do you suggest. So, as far as the subject matter goes, I think these are some of the interesting books. Other than that, you need to find it's like food. Unless you try all kinds of food, you don't know which is your best. So when I was in Goa, Goan fish curry rice. I'm a vegetarian, but let's say vegetable curry rice it was my favorite. But when I came to Bombay, I tried cuisines which I can't even pronounce, and names of foods that I can't even pronounce, and I really liked it. So reading books is like that. You need to explore. You need to pick up any book. Within half the book, you'll realize whether this book is good or not. If it is good, continue it.
Right. Okay. There's another question. Since these are students, a lot of them, I'm sure, must be doing presentations in class.
Right.
So there's this one question from an anonymous attendee. I don't have the name of the person, but he's asking how to overcome nervousness and anxiety when it comes to speaking in front of a lot of people. For example, when you're giving a presentation. So I'm sure with young students, anxiety and nervousness is a part of their presentations. A lot of them are making it for the first time. So yes, can you give them some tips as to how to
Sure.
overcome their anxiety and nervousness?
So I am 36 years old. I have been doing presentations now for 11 years. But every time I put up a presentation and hit the share button, there are butterflies in my stomach, and I am anxious. Will this go off well? Will the people who are looking at it, appreciate what I put? What you have to understand is the effort that you put into making the presentation is as important and will give you as much confidence as required to make the presentation. So if you have put in effort and if you have done the research which is required and you have actually made the slides yourself and not copied it from somewhere else, you automatically get that confidence. So when I started off today's speech, when I started off today's presentation, I was a little nervous at the beginning, but as I started talking, because I have made this presentation myself, I could, talk non-stop for 60 minutes without drinking water, which I will do just now while I take your next question.
All right. So the next question that is there is about again when we speak about digital communication and digital platforms of communication. What do you feel are the challenges when you are communicating on these platforms?
Right. So, see, one of the challenges that most of us have is, a lot of us feel that we are judged by the way we react to certain current happenings. So, for example, if there is, just to take an example, if there is some controversy that has been happening, and you are sitting together in a group, the first thing that comes to mind is, what is your view on this? Now in that group, giving your view is perfectly fine, because your view may not be well informed. But when you put it out on social media, one of the challenges that people face when putting out on social media is because they want to appear smart, but they don't want to do the hard work that it takes to become smart. So if you want to appear smart, the simplest thing to do is research. Make sure that any topic that you are commenting on is either your area of specialization, and if it is not your area of specialization, make sure you're well read about it.
That is very true. I guess having a proper information about what you are speaking actually helps you to communicate better. Also, as you have rightly pointed out, when you were talking about public relations, that public relations is not just about marketing, but it is also about persuading. But when it comes to communication as well, we are persuading people all the time to agree to our point of view.
Correct.
Now, can you also throw some light as to how do we communicate effectively so that the person with whom you are communicating is persuaded with your point of view?
So there are typically two situations that you will face yourself in. One is where the audience doesn't know the subject matter, and the second is where the audience knows the subject matter. Now, when the audience doesn't know the subject matter, anything you say will be new to them, right? Whereas when the audience knows the subject matter, you have to be extremely careful. Sorry, there is some disturbance. Uh, can you hear me, Maria?
Yes, you are audible, sir. You're very much audible. Hello?
Sorry, Maria, can we start over? I don't think, if you can
Okay.
just, yeah,
Yeah. So I'll just repeat the question.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the question is that, as I was saying, we were discussing that persuasion is something which is an important aspect of communication, definitely in the public relation front as well. But when we are communicating, we are also persuading people to agree with our point of view. So, how should one communicate effectively so that people are persuaded with our point of view?
Sorry. So I don't know if you got what I was saying. So I was saying that there are two kinds of people. One, audiences. So one audience is where they know the subject matter, and the second audience is where they don't know the subject matter. Now typically you will face yourself, you will find yourself in a mixed kind of an audience where some people know and some people don't know. So how do you persuade people? The best way to persuade people is to be honest, right? There's absolutely nothing better than honesty. If you don't know something, you don't know something. There's no way you can at that moment standing there in that particular spot be suddenly able to know. But having said that, if you are supposed to know it, then you know you're being dishonest by not having known it in the first place. So what do I mean by that? So let's suppose you're standing in front of your teacher and she has asked you to prepare something and come for a presentation. You have not done that. You can't stand in front of the teacher and pretend to know the subject matter and just shoot off what you're saying. The better thing to do would be spend 10-15 minutes reading up on what the subject matter is. And then when you're talking, not only are you honest, but you also come across as sincere, because you already have that subject matter in mind. uh, you can easily answer the question without having to think too much. So persuasion is basically the ability of the person who's receiving the information to be convinced that what you're giving him is true, and that will come when you appear to be honest and you appear to be sincere.
Again, very correct, very correct. Again, I guess knowing your subject matter is what is important over here as well. When you know your subject matter well, you will be able to put it across in a persuasive manner. Another important aspect of communication is the non-verbal mode of communication. So, as you've rightly said, that even when we are kind of communicating at all times, so we are communicating also when we are not using words, through our gestures, through our body language, through our eye contact. So, can you also again throw some light on these aspects of communication and how important it is in communication?
Sure. So, see, non-verbal cues, as we call them in communication, are basically either involuntary movements or voluntary movements. So, when I say involuntary movements, for example, I can't control the way my head is tilting 15 degrees to the left when I'm talking. Okay, that is involuntary. That's probably because I don't exercise as much, so I don't have good strong neck muscles. But I'm always doing this. Now when people see me tilt my head towards one side, they believe that I'm actually paying attention. I may not be. So you have to be very conscious about what verbal cues you're passing off, because I'll give you an example. We were doing a webinar, we were doing a Zoom call the other day with some 15-20 of us with a client, and the client was sitting like this. Now to us it appeared that he was sleeping, but he was actually paying attention by closing his eyes, because there was a lot of background noise for him. So it's important that you pick up on these cues, and it's not something that I can tell you what these cues are, but you have to realize that you have to be extremely conscious about how you're using your non-verbal cues. So a lot of us like to use our hands, right? Typically when you're communicating, you should use your hands, but don't go all over the place. It should be close to you, and it should be very small gestures, so that the gesture doesn't take away from your speaking. Now when it comes to other non-verbal cues, your body language is sometimes a very big giveaway. You may have put on a look of interest on your face, but the way you are sitting and the way you're reacting, may say something else. So the only advice that I can give you in a webinar is to be extremely conscious about what you're doing. And if you're conscious about what you're doing, typically your cues will automatically come.
Right. Um, So now there are certain times when we are trying to communicate complex ideas, or we are trying to communicate some very sensitive information, and these are the times when we need to be a little more conscious as to how we are putting it across and how we are communicating it. So how do you handle these kind of communications? What are the precautions that one should take while handling communication which involves sensitive information or involves complex ideas?
Sure. So, the reason ideas become complex is because there are several aspects to those ideas. But if you break it down, most complex ideas can be broken down into smaller two, three aspects, and each of those aspects on its own is not as intimidating as when they are put together. So, for instance, if okay, let me take an example of I'm assuming that a lot of the students here are from a commerce background and understand finance. Maria, is that correct?
Actually, we have a mix of students,
Okay.
there are students from
Okay.
commerce and there are students from, yeah.
Okay. So, okay. So let me try and make this a non-finance kind of a problem. So let's suppose like I was telling you earlier, you don't have you don't I don't have my AC working now. I need to get the AC repaired, but the technicians are not allowed to come into my building, right? So for me, doing that AC repair job myself is an extremely complex part. But for the last 10 days, I've been watching videos, and in fact, after this webinar gets over, I'm going to be repairing the AC myself. So what do I need to do for repairing the AC? I've broken it down into different tasks. So whenever you're communicating a complex idea, the simplest thing to do is to break it down into smaller tasks, which are more manageable. I know most of you will say that ये तो बोलने की बात है, ये करने में नहीं होता है. But believe me, ये होता है, पर ये बहुत आसानी से होता है. If you are able to break it down into smaller tasks, those smaller tasks have ready-made solutions. The problem is when you put all of them together, it looks very intimidating. But if you break it down into smaller ideas, then it becomes easier, and therefore your communication of those ideas also becomes easier.
Correct, very correct. Okay, I guess one last question that we can take up before we end of this seminar is, again, there are about two or three questions that we have received saying that I am an introvert, so when somebody asks me some kind of a question, my mind goes blank. So how do I overcome that fear and communicate more effectively?
Sure. So, whoever the anonymous person is who asked that, start by not being anonymous. See, the reason you're an introvert is because so I am myself an introvert. I have very few friends that I normally meet. I have maybe one or two good friends. That's it. I prefer to keep to myself, but that does not stop me from talking to four 500 people at a time. And the reason is the confidence comes from your ability. So a lot of people who a lot of you guys who are introverts, you're underestimating yourself. You think that because your social skills are lacking or are not as good as other people, who have the ability to go up to a stranger and say hi. I can't do that, right? I couldn't do that. Now I can. The only way to do that is to be extremely confident about whatever abilities you have. Now, I refuse to believe that there is anyone in this world who doesn't have some ability or some talent. Okay, however small, however little, there is definitely something there in you for which you are good. Which you're good at, and for which you can easily get that confidence. And once you have that confidence, I mean, then you don't need to worry about what people think of you, because if you're what people what most people in this world appreciate is when people talk with confidence. So the way you can do that is by understanding that every one of us has some innate ability. Build on that ability and let that be the source of your confidence. So for me, the my knowledge, which I've gained through books, is the source of my confidence. I don't look like John Abraham, neither do I have a body like John Abraham, but I can probably talk as confidently as he can. And the only reason is because I have read a lot, and I have studied a lot, and I spent a lot of time building my skills. So that's something probably you can look at as a source of courage for you, to overcome that fear of communicating.
Right, right. Thank you so much, sir. On that note, I guess we come towards the end of today's webinar. So, firstly, I would like to thank Subodh, sir, for giving us your time and sharing your expertise with our students. Thank you for answering all of those questions. I'm sure there's a lot that they have learned today, and they will definitely be implementing it when it comes to communicating now more effectively and in a much more better manner. So thank you so much, sir, for joining us for today's webinar.
Absolutely. One last thing, I've
Um,
put my email ID, which is subodh.mallya at
right.
outlook.com. For all those students whose questions I couldn't answer, if you drop me a line, maybe I can try and respond to those questions over the next day or two.
Yes. Thank you, sir. Thank you for that as well. I guess I tried to cover up most of the questions that were there, except the ones that were repeated. So, in case if your questions were not answered, you may connect with sir. Thank you so much again, sir, for that. Um, so, before we close, I would like to thank Dr. Ansi Jose, ma'am, for her vision and opening the doors to a rising career in sports management to the youth. Special thanks to Dr. Varsha Ainapure, ma'am, for providing us with the opportunity. Before we sign off for today, I would also like to announce that we are having more sessions lined up. The next session for corporate dynamics will be on 9th of June, Tuesday at 11 a.m. If you have not registered yet, register now. Registration links are available on our social media handles. You can share the registration links with your friends and make the most of the sessions while at home. For further updates, you can follow the social media handles Nagandas Khanwala College, NASM on Instagram and Facebook at NASM Institute, Mission Skills on Instagram and Facebook at missions.skills. We would love to hear your feedbacks. Kindly share your feedbacks with us and mention us in your stories. A special thanks to the organizing committee of Mission Skills for their support and coordination, and a big thanks to all our attendees of today's webinar for their kind presence. Thank you all. Uh, Thank you to all the people who were directly or indirectly contributed towards this webinar. On that note, I would like to say to everyone, to all our attendees, to stay at home, stay safe, and see you all very soon. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.